Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this presentation on Islamic beliefs. This presentation is based upon a book called Ummul Barahin by Shaykh Muhammad Yusuf al Sanusi of Algeria, who lived between 1427 to 1419. This is a simplified and adapted presentation of this book. It's a book on Islamic beliefs and states what beliefs are required to be known by a Muslim. And our purpose in learning these beliefs is so that we can know Allah and know what Allah requires us to know about reality. And we only learn these beliefs so that we can, inshallah, approach Allah with a sound heart. As the Quran says, the day where no wealth or children benefits a person except those who come to Allah with a sound heart. And we begin by, with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and we send salutations upon our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. One of the many virtues of salawat is the following hadith: make abundant your salutations upon me, for it solves problems and removes sorrows. May Allah solve our problems and remove our sorrows through the blessings of salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what must we know? We need to know 13 attributes of Allah, and we need to know 4 attributes of a messenger. The 13 attributes of Allah that we need to know are the following: that Allah exists, that He is without a beginning, that He is without an end, that He is totally different to created things, that He is not in need of anything, that He is one, He has power over all things, He intends what He wishes. In other words, He is all-willing, He knows all things, He is living, He sees all things, He hears all things, and He speaks to His creation. The 4 attributes of a messenger that we need to know are that they are truthful, that they are faithful to Allah's commands. In other words, they cannot commit sins, and they are protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that regard. Number 3, they have great intelligence. And number 4, they propagate what they have been ordered to propagate. We need to know, just before going into these attributes, the categories of the mind. Now, the mind divides things into 3 kind of categories. One is the necessary, the other the impossible, and the possible. What is necessary? The necessary is that which must exist. The impossible is that which cannot exist. It's impossible for it to exist, and the possible may or may not exist. Now, the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala must exist. That is, they are necessary. Those are the only things which must exist. The opposites of these attributes cannot exist. It's impossible for them to exist. So, for example, if you take knowledge, Allah is all-knowing. Allah must be all-knowing. It's impossible for Allah not to be knowing. With regard to the 3rd category, and this is called the category of the possible, this applies to creation. In other words, everything Allah created may or may not have been. In other words, it's possible. And so, just in summary, Allah and His attributes must be, their non-existence cannot be, while that which Allah has brought into existence, namely creation, may or may not have been. Let's go to the first attribute of Allah, and that is existence. Allah exists. That is, He is a reality. He is there. What is the proof that Allah exists? Now, there are various proofs for this, and just to give you 3, if we look at the world, things go in and out of existence all the time. The nature of the world is that of fluctuation. Things are changing in their nature all the time. And this means that there must be something that set these changes into motion. There must be something that is not subject to this change that set all these changes into motion, and that something is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's another common proof for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the existence of God, and that is that if we look at the world, everything is perfectly designed. Everything flows according to various laws of nature. And if they did not operate according to those laws, we would have been destroyed. For example, if the sun was fractionally closer to us, we'd burn to death. If it was fractionally further away, we'd all freeze to death. So there must be something, a greater mind, a greater intelligence that is designing the world in this particular ordered fashion. And that designer is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another common proof for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that things cannot come into existence by themselves. There must be ultimately a causeless cause of all things. For example, if we take ourselves, our material cause for us coming to existence are our parents. They in turn, their material cause is their parents. Their parents, so to speak, brought them into existence, and so on and so on and so on. You go up the generations. But there must be right at the beginning, there must be something that set into motion this chain of causes without being subject to being caused itself. And that causeless causer, that causer who doesn't have a cause in itself, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah by definition must be without a cause. So these are some of the rational proofs for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the existence of God. And at the very least, they help establish the fact that belief in God, belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not irrational. However, ultimately, we must also remember that while these rational proofs help us and aid us, and they provide some comfort to the mind, the most important proofs for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are gained through the practice of religion. And there is a story of a particular alim who wrote a number of proofs for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And an old lady was informed about this, and she was less than impressed. Well, she said, if he had so many proofs for the existence of Allah, then he must have had so many doubts about the existence of Allah. Allah is so natural that Allah is everywhere, he doesn't even need any proofs. So, of course, we do need the proofs, and it's important to cultivate rational proofs. But the point of the story is that we should get to that state of belief, inshallah, where the belief in Allah is natural, where it doesn't require these rational proofs. Okay, what is the second attribute of Allah? Allah is without beginning. Now, Allah does not have a beginning. There was no non-existence before Allah's existence. Allah is as He always was. And when we say Allah is the first al-awwal, we mean that He existed before time, as He is the creator of time. And how do we know that Allah does not have a beginning? Well, if Allah had a beginning, then He would be in need of an originator that caused that beginning. And by definition, Allah Himself is the originator of all things. So it's impossible for an originator to be originated by something else. Attribute number 3, Allah is everlasting. And this means that Allah does not have an end, that there is no non-existence after His existence. When we say Al-Akhir, that Allah is the last, it means that Allah is not bound by time, that He exists beyond that which He has created. How do we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot cannot not exist, cannot come to an end? Well, if Allah was to come to an end, then there would be something, a chooser, that would have to choose to bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to an end. However, this would mean that there would be something outside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is prior to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do that. But as we've already seen, that Allah himself is the originator of all things, that there cannot be anything that's prior to him. So this is absurd to think in this particular way. And therefore Allah is without end. Regarding attribute number 4, Allah's absolute distinction to all created things. Now the Quran says nothing is like him. In other words, Allah is different to all other things in his self, in the way he is, in his attributes and his actions. He's not a body, a quality, nor does he have any direction. In other words, he's not above or below things or on the side of things. He does not literally sit in a chair. When the Quran says, he is established on his throne, this means that this is a sign of his great power and his great authority over all things. He does not physically sit on a throne. Why? Because all these kind of things have space, and Allah is beyond space. Similarly, he is not bound by time. When we say that Allah comes down, in the last third of the night, as a hadith states, this is not meant in terms of time. This denotes the closeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah is beyond time. Okay, he is the creator of all time, so we can't think of Allah in a physical way. He is absolutely different to creation. Now, why is this? Because if Allah was similar to creation in any way, then it would be necessary that he has qualities such as having a beginning or an end. And as we've already seen, that Allah does not have a beginning and Allah does not have an end. Regarding the next quality, self-subsistence, Allah is not in need of anything. But there's another meaning also to self-subsistence, and that is that while Allah is not in need of anything, all things are also in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah said Allahu Samad, the word Samad means that upon which everything else depends. This leads to true trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we know that each and every moment depends upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that our every breath depends upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This should lead, inshallah, to trust upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As a hadith says, that if you trust in Allah the way you should be trusted, He would have provided for you like He provides for the birds. They go out in the morning hungry and they return full. So what is the proof that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is self-subsistent, that He is independent? Well, if we think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in need of anything, then it would be like giving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala an attribute. It would be like letting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be an attribute of something else. For example, if we say a book is green, then green is an attribute of that particular book. Here, of course, we're using attribute in a very different sense. We can use the word quality. Green is a quality of a particular book. In other words, green is in need of the book in order to show its greenness, the way it manifests its greenness by being on the book. It's in need of the book. But of course, we can't apply this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this would mean that He would require something else to bring him into existence, just like the green needs the book to show itself. We, we would then be saying, if we say that Allah depends upon something else or is in need of something else, that Allah requires something else to bring him into existence. And as we've already seen, with a proof that Allah is without beginning. So this is impossible. If we go on to the next attribute, it is that Allah is one. In other words, Allah has no partner. Allah cannot be divided up. And this also means that there's nothing like Allah in His self, in the way He is, in His attributes, and in His actions. And what is the proof of that? Well, if there were two gods, their worlds would cancel each other out. And so creation could not come into being. Or even if one God were to agree to defer its will to the other God and say, well, you go ahead and create the world, that means that God would have a defect in carrying out its will. And of course, a defect is not befitting of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, since since one God would need the other God to carry out its will. And as we already saw, Allah must be free from being in need of of anything else. So it's impossible for Allah to have a partner or for there to be more than one God. Regarding the attributes of power, will, knowledge, and life. So Allah has power and He is powerful over all things. And how do we know that? Well, its proof is us. Its proof is everything we see around us. This shows that Allah has power. Allah has brought creation into being. Allah has will and is all willing. And this means that nothing compels Allah to do anything, and that He chooses how He wants to create. How do we know this? Well, if we look at creation, and now we know that through Allah's power, creation has come into being. But if we look at creation itself, now we see that creation has specified colors, quantities, sizes, different types, different characteristics. All of these things points to a creator that has willed these specific elements in these particular ways. And then number 10, Allah has knowledge and He is all-knowing. And then how do we know this? Allah has knowledge of all things. We know this, and it also means, by the way, that Allah has knowledge of things before they come into being, while they're into being, and after they go out of being as well. And He has full knowledge of Himself as well. And how do we know this? Well, Allah chooses to specify, as we just saw, well, things in particular ways. And in choosing to specify things in particular ways, in creating things in particular ways, this presumes that Allah must be knowledgeable about what He creates. And then finally, that was number 9. And then finally, all these qualities, number 10, in other words, the qualities of power, will, and knowledge, assume that Allah has life, that Allah is living. Because anybody who exercises these attributes of power, will, and knowledge must have life. Allah isn't an absent God. Okay, He is a living God. Now we come to the 11th, 12th, and 13th attributes of Allah, and that is hearing, seeing, and speaking. Allah possesses hearing and sight. In other words, He is the all-seeing and all-hearing. Now, this is not connected to physical sight, and it's not connected to physical hearing, because as we've already seen with a previous attribute that Allah is, totally different to all things. Allah cannot have created um, uh, created things such as ears and eyes and so on, organs that require um, us to exercise sight and hearing. So Allah's hearing and sight is totally different to that of creation. Rather, these qualities denote Allah's intense awareness of all things. We also know that Allah has speech and is speaking, and He speaks to he speaks to the prophets, He speaks to the angels. And again, like hearing and sight, this is not connected to physical speech. This is not connected to mouths and to tongues. And speech denotes communication by Allah to His creation. And what is the proof that Allah has seeing, hearing, and speaking? Well, it provides completion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is because if He was not described by these attributes, He may have been described by negative attributes such as the opposite of these, in other words, deafness, blindness, and dumbness, which is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are really attributes of completion, because we know Allah is intensely aware of all things. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees all things, hears all things, and we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala communicates with creation. And these complete Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's primary attributes. So the 13 attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are necessary to Him. The opposites of these attributes are impossible. It's impossible for Allah not to exist, not to have a beginning, to have an end. These are all impossible for Allah to have an end. To be like creation, that's impossible for Allah. To rely on creation, to be in need of things, that's impossible for Allah. To have a partner, that's impossible. To lack power, that's impossible for Allah. To lack will, or to be compelled, that's impossible for Allah. To lack knowledge, that's impossible for Allah. To lack life, that's impossible for Allah. And to lack awareness, to lack hearing and sight, that's impossible for Allah. And to lack communication with His creation, to lack speech, that's impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all these things are impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything else with regard to creation, everything that Allah has brought into creation may or may not have been. Allah has brought it into being, that which we see around us, but it may not have been. But in terms of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, His attributes are necessary, they must be. That's just the reality. And the opposites of these attributes are what we call impossible. And creation itself is possible. It may or may not have been. And that which is still to exist, which still may come into existence, may or may not be. Now we go on to the 4 attributes of a messenger. And the 4 attributes of a messenger are truthfulness, faithfulness, great intelligence, and they carry out what they've been ordered to do. So what is truthfulness? Messengers are sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are truthful, they only speak the truth. How do we know they speak the truth? Well, they speak the truth via their miracles, which cannot be matched. And all the prophets have shown various miracles, which is called mu'jiza. And this is proof of the mission, proof of the fact that they come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The uniqueness, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course, like the other prophets, has shown many miracles. But there's one abiding miracle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a continuing miracle, and that is the Quran, which challenges those who deny its truth to produce a verse like that found in it. And it's a continuing miracle and open challenge. So these miracles confirm the truth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What is truth? Truth is when what you say corresponds with reality. So when I say there's a computer in front of me, of course there's a computer from which I'm reading. That is the truth. If there's a computer in front of me and I say there's no computer in front of me, that's not corresponding with reality. That's a lie. So this is what we mean by truth. But similarly, in terms of prophets, we apply to that, but we also apply to the fact that when they tell us about the fact that there is an Allah, the fact that there are holy books, that there are other prophets, that there is a last day, that there is Jannah and Jahannam, paradise and hell, that there will be a resurrection of all the bodies. All these things correspond with reality. These things are there, they are real. And messengers communicate that, they speak the truth. So we, on the basis of our faith in a messenger, of our faith in the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's abiding miracle, as we've seen, is the Quran, and that itself is proof that the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam speaks on behalf of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. We accept everything the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam tells us about reality. And if they were not truthful, then these manifestations that we see, that we clearly see, would have meant that Allah Himself is lying, because Allah Himself shows these miracles at their hand, and it's impossible, of course, for Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, who is without defects, to lie. The second attribute of a messenger is faithfulness. What is meant by faithfulness? Well, they are faithful to messengers, and prophets are faithful to Allah's commands. In other words, they carry out what Allah has commanded us to do. They don't simply tell us this is what Allah commands you to do and then go about their own different way. They themselves do what is wajib, what is obligatory, what is sunnah, what is recommended, and they keep to the permitted. In other words, and they, the mubah, and they avoid the forbidden. So, and by the way, when they keep to the permitted, they keep to these things with the intention of pleasing Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So, in this, they also enjoy divine protection. In other words, Allah keeps them away from sins, from committing a sin, from committing the forbidden, and keeping them and keeps them adhering to that which is wajib, that which is sunnah, that which is mubah. And how do we know that they are faithful, that they are protected from sin? It's the fact that we are, of course, commanded to follow them. And if they're committed to forbidden, we would simply have followed them in that as well. That is, of course, absurd. And coming to the final two attributes of a messenger, it is great intelligence and propagation. What is meant by great intelligence? Well, messengers are granted intelligence to speak to all kinds of people, and from all social classes, from all cultural backgrounds, and they speak to people at their particular level. And they have, universally, as we see, they have a profound influence on the hearts of people wherever those people come from. No matter, as I said, no matter what their economic, cultural, or social backgrounds, the effect on the heart is equal. And we can see this in the case of Islam very clearly, where Islam composes of people of all ethnicities, all cultural backgrounds, of all social classes, and yet the message hits home. This means that and in the immediate circle of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, similarly, there were people of all different backgrounds and classes, and yet the message hit home to all of them. So prophets have this intelligence to speak to people at their particular level. It's just beyond, normal human intelligence. Finally, prophets do not hide what they are supposed to communicate to their audiences. They propagate what they are ordered to, do. They are, of course, given certain things sometimes by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which are special to them, divine secrets and so on, which they are not allowed to communicate. But what they have been told to communicate, they communicate. And as we've already seen, a proof of this is the fact that they are faithful to Allah's commands. Finally, prophets and messengers are human beings. They eat, they drink, they sleep, they become sick. And all of this, the fact that these things happen to them, it does not diminish their status. And there's a lot of divine wisdom in why they've been given these human qualities. And one of the foremost reasons is the fact that we follow them. And so we need to follow them with regard to all of these as well. And when we come, we've now done with the four attributes of the messengers. And just in conclusion, we have tried to provide some rational proofs for the various Islamic beliefs based upon the Ummul Barahin. At the very least, I think they show that these beliefs are not irrational and that cases can be made for all of them. There's, of course, another avenue for sourcing proofs for these attributes, and that is simply to believe in the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and what he has told us. And how is this a proof? It's because the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his nubuwwah, his prophethood, is proven through the abiding miracle of the Quran. The Quran has challenged us to produce a verse like it. And this challenge could not be matched or replicated. And so whatever the Quran contains, we believe. Thank you.